feared young kids in US prisons. Let's begin with T.J. Lane. First on the list is a killer whose seemingly innocent appearance masks the true monster lurking beneath. On February 27, 2012, the small town of Chardon, Ohio, was plunged into tragedy when a high school shooting carried out by T.J. Lane left the community reeling. Lane, a 17-year-old student at Lake Academy Alternative School, entered the Chardon High School cafeteria that morning wearing a sweatshirt with "Killer" written on it and armed with a .22 caliber handgun. The shooting began opened fire, aiming directly at a table where a group of students was seated. In a matter of moments, 3 students were fatally wounded: 16-year-olds Daniel Parmator and Demetrius Hewlin, and 17-year-old Russell King Jr. Additionally, 3 other students were injured, one of whom suffered permanent paralysis. Lane was not a stranger to the students at Chardon High School, as he had attended the school before transferring to the alternative education program. The motive behind his violent actions remained largely unclear, though some reports suggested he felt victimized or ostracized. The response to the shooting was swift. A teacher chased Lane out of the school, and he was later apprehended by authorities near his car parked about a mile away from the scene. Subsequent investigations revealed that Lane had stolen the gun used in the shootings from his uncle. During his trial, Lane's demeanor was notably defiant and disturbing. He appeared in court wearing a t-shirt with the word "Killer" scrawled across it, which he had written himself. He smirked and made obscene gestures to the families of the victims, showing no remorse for his actions. In March 2013, Lane was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. However, on September 11, 2014, Lane, accompanied by 2 other inmates, broke out of the Allen Correctional Institution in Lima, Ohio. This situation was particularly alarming given Lane's criminal history. For hours during the manhunt, he was nowhere to be found, until he was apprehended 6 hours later. In March 2016, amidst heightened security concerns, Lane was transferred to the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville, a fortress-like maximum security prison designed to house the most dangerous inmates. A friend of Lane spoke with CNN, describing him as just a very normal teenage boy, and expressed being in complete shock over the recent incident. She noted that although Lane often appeared sad, he seemed otherwise normal in his daily behavior. Another friend shared insights into Lane's school life, revealing that he was regularly teased by his peers. This bullying led Lane to put a wall around himself, making him reluctant to share personal details or open up about his experiences. But these accounts raise a critical question: can the difficulties Lane faced at home and the bullying justify his actions? Alyssa Bustamante.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
I never have, and I hope never to see another case like this.
In a chilling episode that shook the nation, Alyssa Bustamante, a 15-year-old from Missouri, became infamously known as the Missouri teen thrill killer. Her heinous act involved the calculated murder of her 9-year-old neighbor, Elizabeth Alton. Alyssa Bustamante appeared to be an ordinary teenage girl, but her internet persona revealed a far darker side. This hidden darkness erupted on October 21, 2009, when Bustamante lured her 9-year-old neighbor, Elizabeth Alton, into the woods. There, she strangled the young girl, slit her throat, and stabbed her in the chest with a kitchen knife. After the murder, Alyssa buried Elizabeth's body in a shallow grave she had hand-dug behind their homes. This brutal act seemed to be a manifestation of Alyssa's most horrific fantasies. Her public MySpace and YouTube profiles disturbingly listed killing people and cutting as her hobbies, hinting at the violent thoughts she harbored. On the day of the murder, Alyssa recorded in her journal, revealing her homicidal thoughts and expressing a chilling curiosity about what it felt like to take a life. She wrote, "I just killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how to feel ATM. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the oh my god I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kinda nervous and shaky though right now. Okay, I gotta go to church now. LOL." On the evening of October 21st, 2009, after Patty Price reported her daughter, Elizabeth Alton, missing, police launched an urgent search. The investigation soon led to Alyssa Bustamante's home, where interviews with her family and the discovery of her journal containing incriminating details pointed to her involvement. Confronted with her journal entries during a rigorous interrogation, Bustamante was pressured into confessing to the crime. She tried to play innocent at first, but then the police told her that they'd found the journal.
"We have your diary. We've read your diary, including the last entry."
When pushed a little harder and having nowhere to go, she initially admitted it was an accident, but it all didn't last long, as she confessed to digging the hole 5 days prior to Elizabeth's death. Then the investigator pointed out that an autopsy would reveal exactly how Elizabeth died. He pressed her further by asking, how did she kill her? To which Alyssa made the confession, 2012 trial, Alyssa Bustamante, tried as an adult despite a turbulent childhood, pled guilty to second-degree murder to avoid a life sentence without parole. This means there's a possibility of parole after 30 years. However, an additional conviction for armed criminal action means that even if she secures parole in 2024, she faces another 30 years, pushing her earliest possible release to 2054 at the age of 60. The next killer kid is Lionel Tate. 2 children are left alone to play, and a 6-year-old girl ends up dead. Was this merely a case of child's play gone horribly wrong, or was there something more sinister at work? On July 28, 1999, in Broward County, Florida, 12-year-old Lionel Tate found himself alone with his 6-year-old cousin, Tiffany Unick. That day tragically ended with an event that would see Tate become the youngest American ever sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
She looks like she's not breathing. I tried to do CPR. Okay, is she breathing or no? No, she's not. Are you next to her right now? Yeah, she had some food that was coming out of her mouth.
On that evening, while Kathleen Grossett Tate was resting upstairs, she left Tiffany Unick in the care of her son, Lionel Tate. Shortly after, Tate alerted his mother that Tiffany was not breathing. Investigation later revealed that the child displayed severe bruises and injuries akin to a vehicular impact, including a fractured skull, a broken rib, and internal hemorrhaging. Tate, however, claimed the injuries resulted from imitating wrestling moves. During the trial, Tate's defense presented the argument that Unick's death was a tragic accident, suggesting that the 12-year-old, who weighed 170 pounds, was merely attempting to imitate wrestling moves of his television heroes with Tiffany, who weighed just 48 pounds. However, their defense failed to sway the jury. In January 2001, when Tate was only 13 years old, he was convicted of first-degree murder. Under Florida law, Tate was convicted of first-degree murder without the jury needing to believe he intended to harm. The law stipulates that knowingly committing an act likely to injure a child, resulting in death, qualifies as child abuse and triggers the felony murder rule. During sentencing, Judge Joel T. Lazarus outlined that this rule applied even without proof of Tate's intent to kill or awareness of the potential for harm. He even went on to say that the decision was not entirely his to make. Consequently, Tate was sentenced to life in prison without the necessity for the prosecution to demonstrate his intent or understanding of the lethal consequences of his actions. Understandably, the sentence sparked controversy given that Tate was only 12 years old at the time of the murder, while his victim was just 6 years old. Eventually, Tate's life sentence was overturned in 2004 by an appeals court that found his mental competency hadn't been properly assessed before trial. Consequently, Tate was released from prison under a plea agreement in January 2004, which involved him admitting to second-degree murder in exchange for 1 year of house arrest and 10 years of probation. Although this marked a new beginning for Tate, then 16, his legal troubles continued. In 2005, he faced charges of armed robbery, and a probation violation in 2006 led to his return to prison. On February 19, 2008, Lionel Tate entered a no-contest plea to robbery charges and received a 10-year sentence to be served in state prison. This sentence was set to run concurrently with a 30-year sentence he received for violating his probation. Currently, Tate is serving his time at the Charlotte Correctional Institution. Bever Brothers. This case is recognized as the deadliest act of crime and mass murder in Broken Arrow, often referred to as the Bever Family Massacre. What I'm about to share with you will send chills down your spine. For the Bever brothers, the pursuit of becoming famous drove their insane actions. Detective Rihanna Russell, who interviewed the younger brother Michael, reported they wanted to kill at least 50 people. They wanted to be famous. They wanted a Wikipedia page. They wanted media coverage. Unfortunately, the tragic series of events began on the evening of July 22, 2015. In their home in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. Robert D., aged 18, and Michael, aged 16, had secretly amassed a collection of knives, which they used to attack their family members. The horrifying ordeal started when Michael deceitfully drew his sister into a bedroom under the pretense of showmers. Their youngest brother, Christopher, just 7, received 6 stab wounds. The brothers then attacked their sister, Victoria, 18, stabbing her 18 times across her neck, chest, back, and upper arm. Amidst the bloody chaos, Daniel, 12, managed to lock himself in a room and call 911 for help. However, he was tricked into opening the door by Michael, who acted as a victim himself. Once inside, the brothers stabbed Daniel 9 times. Daniel's quick thinking and call for help played a crucial role in saving his sisters Autumn, aged 2, and Crystal, aged 13. As police quickly arrived at the scene, the brothers fled through the back of the house, but were soon located by a police K9 in a wooded area nearby. And then, Crystal Bever, a survivor of the Bever Family Massacre, identified her older brothers Robert and Michael as as the perpetrators, leading to their charges of 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of assault with intent to kill, to which they pleaded not guilty. In 2016 and 2018, Robert and Michael Beaver were convicted on all counts for the Beaver family massacre, receiving multiple life sentences. Robert was sentenced to life without parole, while Michael, due to his younger age, received life sentences with possible parole, though his release is highly improbable. Heavenly Arroyo. Now let's look at the case of a 15-year-old girl who ended the life of Ana Vasquez Rodriguez in a barbaric manner. Arroyo, who had recently moved into her great-uncle's home on Johnson Street, was living there with Ana Vasquez Rodriguez and her grandson. The house, where tensions were already high, became the site of a violent crime. On October 6, 2019, Arroyo's great-uncle had planned a trip to New York to secure legal documents for her custody, but was delayed due to car troubles, causing Arroyo significant frustration and agitation as the day went on. Arroyo, unable to contain her growing impatience, took a pair of scissors from the kitchen and entered Ana Vasquez Rodriguez's bedroom, where she unleashed a brutal attack, stabbing the bedridden 68-year-old woman 70 times. At the time of this horrific act, the only other person present in the house was the victim's grandson, who was playing a video game, wearing a headset, completely unaware of the tragedy unfolding. After the murder, Arroyo took a shower, discarded her blood-stained clothes in a nearby dumpster, and then coldly informed the grandson that his grandmother was unwell. Discovering the horrible reality, the grandson immediately dialed 911, and police swiftly arrived at the scene. The breakthrough in the investigation came when video surveillance footage provided by the Fall River Housing Authority showed Arroyo disposing of the clothes, contradicting her initial claim that she was outside with the dog and had seen a masked man fleeing the scene. Once in custody, Arroyo's demeanor shifted as she made several incriminating admissions spontaneously. Heavenly Arroyo stood in a Fall River courtroom, smiling and flipping her hair as she faced a murder charge. When her name was called in court, the teenager's response shocked everyone.
Heavenly Arroyo.
In 2023, Arroyo, then 18-year-old, pleaded guilty Tuesday in Fall River Superior Court to second-degree murder. She was sentenced by Judge Renee Dupuis to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 19 years. Sierra Halseth. How does a teenager end up committing such a brutal act of murder? While the Beaver brothers sought media attention through heinous crimes, this particular case explores the dynamics of teenage rebellion involving a young girl and her boyfriend. In the shadow of a custody battle between Daniel Halseth and his first ex-wife, former state senator Elizabeth Halseth, now Elizabeth Helgelian, a chilling plot unfolded. Sierra Halseth, then 16, and her 18-year-old boyfriend, Aaron Guerrero, were briefly together, before their relationship was curtailed by their parents, who discovered the couple's plan to run away to Los Angeles. On April 8, 2021, Sierra and Aaron prepared for a violent act by purchasing a circular saw blades, bleach, lighter fluid, gloves, and a drop cloth from stores near Daniel Halseth's home. The next day, Halseth's brutally mutilated body was found in his garage, with an autopsy revealing over 70 stab wounds to his head, neck, and torso. Further horror was added as his remains, stuffed into a sleeping bag, were set ablaze, leaving his body charred from head to toe. The couple's brazenness extended beyond the murder. They uploaded a declaration. Guerrero announced,
"Welcome back to our YouTube channel. After murdering Day 3 after murdering somebody."
Wow! Don't put it on the camera.
Their run from justice was short-lived, as they were apprehended in Salt Lake City shortly after the video went live. On May 26, 2022, Guerrero and Sierra Halseth faced the consequences of their actions, pleading guilty to 9 counts, including murder, arson, and robbery. Both were sentenced to 22 years to life in prison, with the possibility of parole. At the sentencing, Sierra offered no apology, while Guerrero did. Roxana Sikorsky. In a case that gripped the suburban community of Plymouth, Michigan, 15-year-old Roxana Sikorsky and her adult boyfriend faced severe charges for conspiring to murder her family. The story of Roxana Sikorsky is a tragic one, beginning with her adoption from Poland at the age of 4, along with her 2 siblings, by the Sikorsky family. Early abuse led to a diagnosis of reactive attachment disorder for Roxana, a condition that made it difficult for her to form emotional bonds with her caregivers. At the age of 15, in October 2014, Roxana's life took a dark turn turn under the influence of her 23-year-old boyfriend, Michael Rivera. Rivera, who was much older, manipulated Roxana and hatched a plan to murder her family members, who were against their relationship. He went so far as to send Roxana detailed instructions on how to carry out the killings, including a medical diagram to ensure she targeted vital areas. That night, Roxana attacked her younger brother with a fillet knife, aiming for his neck, but thankfully, he survived. Her sister's screams alerted the parents, and Roxana fled the scene, escaping through a window. She met up with Rivera, and they hid in southwest Detroit, but were soon found by the police. Due to the premeditated nature of her actions, prosecutors charged Roxana as an adult. In March 2016, a Detroit court sentenced her to 10 to 20 years in prison for the conspiracy to kill her family, while Rivera received a life sentence in 2015. Roxana's parents were devastated by the court's decision. They didn't believe she truly intended to harm them and felt she was coerced into accepting the plea deal without their input. Roxana's mother, Lorene Sikorsky, voiced her distress. She's in desperate need of continued psychological help. She is still fragile, and an adult prison would shatter her delicate world. How will sentencing her as an adult help her? Is this justice? Roxana also shared her side of the story.
He goes, cut slice like a tomato. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, on the neck. He sends me an artery picture. And it's like right over here, where you do that.
Eric Smith. This is the case that made national headlines in the United States. "It's okay, Mom, I'll go by myself," were the last words Doreen Roby heard from her 4-year-old son, Derek Roby. Let's take a closer look at this notorious case. On a seemingly ordinary summer day, August 2nd, 1993, the tranquility of Savona, New York, was shattered by a devastating act of violence. 13-year-old Eric Smith encountered 4-year-old Derek Roby, who was en route to a summer camp in the local park. In a sinister turn, Smith lured the young boy into a secluded wooded area under the guise of showing him a shortcut. There, he mercilessly ended the young boy's life by first strangling him until he passed out, and then by dropping a large rock on his head. He then took Kool-Aid from Robbie's lunchbox and poured it into Robbie's open wounds. Later that day, the reality of the dark tragedy unfolded when Derek's mother arrived at the park to pick him up, only to discover that he had never made it to camp. Hours later, searchers discovered Derek's body in the woods, only yards from the park, and with the perpetrator still free, the residents of Savona were gripped by fear for the safety of their own children. Who knew it was a seemingly innocent-looking Eric Smith? By August 8th, overwhelmed by guilt, Eric confessed to his mother that he had killed Derek. That night, the Smith family informed the police.
This terrible thing was done. I think everybody, including myself, thought it was an adult. How could anybody do such a terrible, terrible thing?
Eric was subsequently tried as an adult, marking him as the youngest murder defendant in New York State history. During his trial, specialists conducted extensive medical testing, including assessments of his brain function and hormone levels, but found no abnormalities that could explain his violent actions. Court records note that Eric, often isolated and bullied for his appearance, struggled socially. A week after his confession, Eric was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced on November 7th, 1994. At just 14 years of age, Eric was sentenced to the maximum term available for juvenile offenders at the time, 9 years to life in prison. Eric Smith served nearly 3 decades behind bars. During his time in prison, Smith was denied parole multiple times, with the parole board frequently citing concerns about his release into society. Over the years, Smith underwent various rehabilitation programs and repeatedly expressed remorse for his actions. In 2021, after numerous parole hearings, Eric Smith was finally granted parole and released from prison. Joshua Phillips.
Growing up in prison, I've seen many dark things, and I've been to dark places. Many times throughout this journey, I came dreadfully close to ending my life just to escape it all.
This is the case of Joshua Phillips, who went into prison as a child in 1999 at the age of 15 and has now become a fully grown man. His crime? Convicted of first-degree murder for the death of 8-year-old Maddie Clifton. On November 3rd, 1998, in the Lakewood neighborhood of Jacksonville's South Side, 8-year-old Maddie Clifton was reported missing by her mother. Maddie had been playing outside her home when she disappeared, triggering an immediate and widespread community response. Flyers were distributed and search parties were organized, drawing over over 400 local volunteers who tirelessly searched the area for any sign of the missing girl. Phillips was also a part of that search team. Despite these efforts, a week passed with no trace of Clifton. Then, on November 10th, a startling discovery was made. The mother of 14-year-old Joshua Phillips noticed a wet spot on the floor of her son's room. Upon further investigation, she uncovered Maddie Clifton's body hidden within the room. Reeling from shock, she fled the home and alerted the authorities, leading to her son's arrest at his school mere hours later. And within hours after being arrested, he confessed to the murder. I have to warn you that the following details of Maddie's murder are disturbing. Viewers' discretion is advised. On November 3rd, 1998, a tragic sequence of events took place that changed the lives of Joshua Phillips and others around him. According to Phillips, 8-year-old Maddie Clifton came over to his house to play baseball. Phillips, who knew he wasn't allowed to have friends over while his parents were away, agreed to play. The game took a catastrophic turn when Phillips accidentally hit Clifton in the eye with the baseball, causing her a significant injury. Panicked and fearful of his father's reaction, his father had a history of alcoholism and was strict. Phillips dragged Clifton inside his house in a misguided attempt to manage the situation. Once inside, Phillips's panic escalated. To silence Clifton's cries, he hit her with the baseball bat. He then hid her under the base of his bed and tried to act normally when his father came home. Realizing later that Clifton was still alive and hearing her moans, Phillips's response was drastic and fatal. He further attacked Clifton, cutting her throat and stabbing her chest multiple times with a knife from a Leatherman tool, ultimately leading to her death. Also, he was using air fresheners to mask the smell of the rotting body. Following the murder of 8-year-old Maddie Clifton, 15-year-old Joshua Phillips was charged as an adult with first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole, avoiding the death penalty due to his age. As of the latest updates, Joshua Phillips, now aged 40, remains incarcerated at the Cross City Correctional Institution. Thanks for watching this video. Check out the on-screen cards now for more stories.
I just need the medicine. Come Monday, it was died like 9 o'clock in the morning. I had an appointment at 10. He would have lived. Trust me, that medicine's unbelievable. But I called like 3 vets, and they won't just give you medicine. You have to see the pen. I thought this guy would let me get it because I go to him all the time. And that...
Hi, I'm Brad Baxter, founder.
Hi.
Imagine being locked up in the same cell as Catherine Knight, the infamous Australian cannibal, or Eileen Warnos, the notorious serial killer. These women not only struck fear in society, but also instilled terror within prison walls. In this video, we explore the lives of the most feared women in prison, delving into their chilling stories and the reign of terror they maintained behind bars. Krista Pike. In a maximum security prison, there's a power hierarchy among inmates. At the top is Krista Gale Pike, known for her terrifying crimes. Born on March 10th, 1976 in West Virginia, Krista had a rough childhood marked by her parents' divorce and frequent moves, leading her to drop out of high school. At 18, Krista joined the Job Corps, a government program for troubled youth in Knoxville, Tennessee. There, her life took a dark turn. In January 1995, Krista, her boyfriend Tadaril Ship, and her friend Shadola Peterson committed a gruesome crime. They lured Colleen Slemmer, another Job Corps student, to a secluded area, pretending to offer peace. Driven by jealousy, Krista believed Colleen was trying to steal her boyfriend. For 30 minutes, they brutally beat and murdered Colleen. Krista even took a piece of Colleen's skull as a trophy. This savage act shocked the nation and led to Krista's quick arrest. Convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, Krista became notorious in the Tennessee prison for women. Her crime and violent behavior made her a feared figure. In March 2004, her reputation grew when she and another inmate, Natasha Cornett were involved in an attempted murder plot against another prisoner. This incident showed Krista's ongoing capacity for violence, even under strict prison surveillance. Krista's interactions with prison staff have also been problematic. She has received numerous infractions for not following rules and being aggressive, often resulting in solitary confinement. These actions reinforced her dangerous image, making it clear she is hard to manage. To manage Krista, the prison takes specific security measures, though details are kept confidential. These measures likely include regular checks, controlled movement, and solitary confinement to prevent harm. Staff are trained in de-escalation techniques and crisis intervention, receiving support to handle the stress of overseeing high-risk inmates like Krista. However, since her 1996 conviction, Krista has been involved in numerous legal proceedings and appeals. Her case drew a lot of attention because she is one of the youngest women sentenced to death in the US. Her defense team has filed many appeals, arguing she had mental health issues at the time of the crime, which was not properly considered, and that her original defense was ineffective. In 2000, the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed her conviction, but found errors in the sentencing phase. However, they concluded these errors did not warrant overturning her death sentence. Despite these legal challenges, Krista remains on death row. She remains a central, feared figure in the Tennessee prison for women. Next, we have the story of the sweet-looking grandma who was a cold-hearted poisoner. Velma Barfield. In the shadowed halls of Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, a chilling presence haunted even the toughest inmates. Velma Barfield, who looked like a sweet grandmother, was known as the most feared woman in prison. Her life began in the rural town of Eastover, North Carolina, on October 29, 1932. Raised near Fayetteville, young Velma's childhood was marked by her father's abuse, while her mother, Lillian Bullard, remained silent. Seeking escape, Velma married Thomas Burke in 1949. They had 2 children and a brief period of happiness. However, after a hysterectomy and chronic back pain, Velma became addicted to drugs. This addiction tore their household apart. Thomas turned to alcohol, leading to frequent arguments and a broken home. In this chaos, Velma's dark transformation began. On April 4th, 1969, a fire engulfed their home, killing Thomas, who was passed out from drinking. Suspicion surrounded Velma, but no charges were brought against her. Left as a single mother, Velma sought stability and soon married Jennings Barfield in 1970. Yet, Jennings died of heart complications on March 22, 1971, less than a year after their marriage, deepening the shadow of doubt. By 1974, Velma's criminal activities escalated. Her mother, Lillian Bullard, died on December 30th, 1974. Caring for the elderly, and more deaths followed. Montgomery and Dolly Edwards, Record Lee and Roland Stewart Taylor all died under suspicious circumstances with Velma nearby. Taylor's death on February 3rd, 1978 from arsenic poisoning finally led to her arrest. Velma Barfield's trial for the murder of Roland Stewart Taylor captivated North Carolina. The prosecution depicted her as a cold-hearted poisoner, while the defense tried to portray her as a woman broken by abuse and addiction. Velma confessed to killing her mother, Dolly Edwards, and John Henry Lee. She was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. On November 2nd, 1984, Velma Barfield became the first woman executed by lethal injection in the U.S. since the 1970s reinstatement of capital punishment. Her final statement expressed remorse, and her last meal was simply cheese doodles and Coca-Cola. Next up is the Angel of Death, who struck fear into the hearts of many. Janine Jones. In the quiet halls of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, whispers about Janine Jones still haunt the inmates. Known as the Angel of Death, Jones was a nurse whose hands brought death instead of healing. Janine Jones was born on July 13, 1950, in Texas. Adopted by a nightclub owner and his wife, her early life seemed ordinary. She worked as a beautician before deciding to pursue nursing in the late 1970s. Jones married her high school sweetheart in 1968, had a child, divorced in 1974, and then rekindled the relationship, having another child in 1977. However, her personal life was chaotic, ending in a brief marriage to a 19-year-old nursing assistant just before her indictment. Jones started working at Bexar County Hospital's Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, where she was responsible for the most vulnerable patients. A disturbing number of children died under her care, but the hospital, fearing a scandal, quietly asked her and other licensed vocational nurses, LVNs, to resign. Jones moved on to a pediatric clinic in Kerrville, Texas, where children again experienced sudden, unexplained medical crises. A turning point came when a doctor found a tampered vial of succinylcholine, a powerful powerful paralytic agent. The puncture marks on the vial suggested misuse. Jones claimed she wanted to establish a pediatric intensive care unit in Kerrville, but her actions indicated a darker motive. She injected children with drugs that could stop their hearts and paralyze their lungs. Authorities began an investigation, uncovering the extent of Jones's crimes. The Angel of Death had harmed and possibly killed dozens of children. In 1985, Jones was found guilty of murdering 15-month-old Chelsea McClellan with a lethal injection of succinylcholine and was sentenced to 99 years in prison. She faced additional charges for harming other children, including Brandy Benitez, Chris Parker, Jimmy Pearson, Misty Reichenau, and Jacob Evans. Jones's potential early release due to a Texas law aimed at reducing prison overcrowding alarmed many. In 2017, just before her possible release, she was indicted for the murder of 11-month-old Joshua Sawyer. This move ensured she would remain behind bars. In 2020, Jones pleaded guilty to Sawyer's murder, receiving a life sentence with no parole chance until age 87. Following this is the chilling story of a mother who killed her children. Mary Beth Tinning. Mary Beth Tinning's story is one of the most chilling in criminal history. Born on September 11, 1942, in Duanesburg, New York, Mary Beth's school years were uneventful, and she graduated from Duanesburg High School in 1961. Afterwards, she took low-paying jobs until she became a nursing assistant at Ellis Hospital in Schenectady. In 1963, she met Joseph Tinning on a blind date, and they married in 1965. Their first child, Barbara, was born in 1967, followed by Joseph Jr. in 1970. In 1971, her father died of a heart attack. 3 months later, Mary Beth's third child, Jennifer, was born with severe complications and also died within a week. The tragedies continued with Joseph Jr., who died of a seizure at age 2, and Barbara, who died of Rey syndrome at 5. The deaths of Timothy, Nathan, and Mary Frances followed, attributed to various causes of cardiac arrest. Despite adopting Michael, tragedy struck again when he also died. Suspicion began to grow. The birth of Tammy Lynn in 1985 brought brief hope, but she died of suffocation in December. Authorities, led by Betsy Mannix from Social Services and Bob Imfeld from the Schenectady Police, finally investigated the Tinning household. Tests confirmed Tammy Lynn's death by asphyxia, leading to Mary Beth's arrest. The trial in June 1987 captivated the nation. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including testimonies from pediatrician Dr. Bradley Ford and medical examiner Thomas Oram, who confirmed Tammy Lynn's smothering. The jury found Mary Beth guilty of second-degree murder after 6 weeks of trial and 23 hours of deliberation. Experts speculate Mary Beth might have had Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disorder where a caregiver fabricates or induces illness for attention. She never received a formal diagnosis. In prison, she faced a harsh routine and the dislike of fellow inmates. In March 2007, Mary Beth told the parole board she remembered her daughter's death but denied causing it. In 2009, she spoke of bad times but was found to lack true remorse. In 2011, she admitted to just doing it after losing her other children. Yet again, her parole was denied. Similar outcomes followed in 2013 and 2015. After 6 parole denials, Mary Beth was finally released on August 21, 2018 at age 76 after serving 31 years. Her husband, Joseph, remained by her side. As part of her parole conditions, Mary Beth was to remain under supervision for life, adhere to a curfew, and attend domestic violence counseling. Just like the case of Mary Beth Tinning, this next story isn't any different. Diane Downs. In the American prison system, one name instills fear: Elizabeth Diane Downs. Her tale begins in Phoenix, Arizona, born on August 7, 1955, to Wesley and Willardine Fredrickson. Diane's upbringing was strict, dominated by her father Wesley's authoritarian presence. Feeling neglected, she rebelled, leading to a strained relationship with her parents. Diane found solace in Steve Downs, whom she met in high school. Ignoring her parents' disapproval, she married Steve in 1973, seeking to escape her family. They had 3 children: Christy Ann in 1974, Cheryl Lynn in 1976, and Stephen Daniel in 1979, the latter fathered by a friend, Mark Sager, during Diane's extramarital affair. The marriage was rocky, plagued by financial problems and infidelity, leading to their divorce in 1980. Diane's disturbing behavior toward her children worried Steve. He recalled their daughter Cheryl asking about a gun, expressing a desire to die because Diane had labeled her bad. On May 19, 1983, Diane's life took a dark turn. She arrived at Mackenzie Willamette Hospital with her 3 children who had been shot. Cheryl was dead, Christy had a stroke, and Danny was paralyzed. Diane herself had a gunshot wound. She claimed a carjacker had attacked them, but investigators doubted her story. evidence. The investigation revealed Diane owned a .22 caliber handgun, matching the weapon used in the shooting. Witnesses saw her car driving slowly towards the hospital, contradicting her claim of rushing for help. 9 months later, on February 28, 1984, Diane was arrested and charged with murder, attempted murder, and assault. The prosecution argued she wanted to eliminate her children to be with her lover, Robert Knickerbocker, who didn't want kids. During the trial, the most damning testimony came from her daughter Christy, who confirmed Diane shot them. On June 17, 1984, Diane was convicted on all charges and sentenced to life plus 50 years. The judge intended for her never to be free again. In prison, Diane showed no remorse, continuing to weave stories of innocence and blaming various fictional attackers. Diagnosed with personality disorders, she remained detached from reality. Her most shocking act came on July 11, 1987, when she escaped from prison, sparking a massive manhunt. She was recaptured 10 days later and found with 2 other escapees, adding 5 years to her sentence and leading to her transfer to a higher security facility in New Jersey. Next up is most dangerous woman in Britain, Joanne Dennehy. Meet Joanna Christine Dennehy. The began to surface. Unstable relationships led her to Kevin Lee, a property developer and landlord, and into a deadly attraction. She also befriended Łukasz Slaboszewski, a Polish national who shared her substance abuse habits, and John Chapman, her housemate. Both men would become victims of her growing bloodlust. In March 2013, Dennehy embarked on what became known as the Peterborough Ditch Murders. Her first victim was Łukasz Slaboszewski, last seen alive between March 19th and 29. Dennehy's next victims were her lover and landlord, Kevin Lee, and her housemate, John Chapman. On March 29th, Dennehy killed both Lee and Chapman. Lee's body, dressed post-mortem in a black sequined dress, was found near Newborough the next day. The bodies of Slaboszewski and Chapman were found on April 3rd near Thorney, both bearing fatal stab wounds. Dennehy's killing spree did not end there. She and her friend Gary Stretch drove to Hereford, where she randomly attacked and stabbed 2 men, both dog walkers, who miraculously survived. She even stole the second man's dog. Dennehy was captured shortly after the attacks in Hereford, ending her reign of terror. On November 18th, 2013, Joanna Christine Dennehy stood before the judge at the Old Bailey and pleaded guilty to the murders of 3 men and the attempted murder of 2 others. Throughout the trial, Dennehy's behavior was defiant and mocking, laughing during proceedings and interrupting to assert her autonomy. Dennehy was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, joining a handful of women in the UK with such a sentence, including Myra Hindley and Rosemary West. Her accomplices, Gary Stretch and Leslie Layton, also faced justice. Life in prison for Dennehy has been rough. While in detention at HM Prison Bronzefield, she was involved in a harrowing escape plot, which included plans to murder a prison officer and sever a finger to bypass biometric security. This led to her being placed in solitary confinement from September 2013 to September 2015. Her claims of human rights violations were dismissed by the High Court of Justice. Despite being behind bars, Joanna Christine Dennehy continues to instill fear and command attention, just like this next case of the most notorious serial killer in the US, Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos, often called the most feared woman in prison, lived a life filled with violence, rebellion, and infamy. Born on February 29, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan, Aileen's early years were filled with rejection and abuse. Her mother, a 14-year-old girl, married an 18-year-old man with a violent criminal past. Before Aileen could remember him, her father was imprisoned for crimes against children, casting a shadow over her life from the start. Aileen's childhood was marked by abandonment and abuse. Her mother left her and her brother with their alcoholic grandparents, who neglected and abused them. By age 11, Aileen was forced into prostitution to survive, exchanging her body for basic necessities like food and substances. The streets were unforgiving, and Aileen encountered men who exploited her vulnerability. In 1986, Aileen met Tyria Moore, and their volatile relationship was sustained by Aileen's work as a prostitute. By 1989, Aileen's life of desperation turned to one of cold-blooded killing. The highways of Florida became her hunting ground. Her first victim was Richard Mallory, a 51-year-old electronics store owner. In November 1989, he picked up Aileen, but their encounter ended with his death. She claimed self-defense, stating Mallory had tried to rape her, but the jury was unconvinced. In 1990, the body count rose. In May, the remains of David Spears, a 43-year-old construction worker, were found riddled with bullets. In June, Charles Cascadden, a 56-year-old rodeo worker, was shot 9 times. Peter Seams, a 65-year-old retired seaman, went missing in June, and although his body was never found, Aileen was linked to his disappearance. Troy Burris, a 50-year-old sausage salesman, policeman, was found in July with 2 gunshot wounds. Charles Humphreys, a 56-year-old child abuse investigator, was discovered in September and shot 6 times. The final known victim was Walter Gino Antonio, a 62-year-old trucker whose nearly nude body was found in November, bringing her known victim count to 7. Aileen's method was chillingly consistent. She would shoot her victims multiple times, strip their bodies, and steal their cars and belongings. Her motives were a complex mix of survival, anger, and a twisted sense of retribution for the wrongs she had endured. Aileen's arrest came in January 1991 at a biker bar. Overwhelming evidence, including her fingerprints on the victim's belongings, sealed her fate. Her trial in 1992 was a media spectacle. Aileen's defense of self-defense claims failed, as the prosecution painted her as a cold-blooded killer. She was found
When the world counts on you, you can count on us. We're in this together. Victorious.
guilty of first-degree murder for Richard Mallory's death, and later pleaded no contest to 3 other murders, receiving multiple death sentences. Psychologists diagnosed Aileen with borderline and antisocial personality disorders, shedding light on her lack of empathy and violent outbursts. Aileen's time on death row was marked by psychological turmoil and controversy. She made claims of mistreatment and believed her mind was being controlled. As her execution date approached, her final statements were a mix of defiance and cryptic messages. On October 9th, 2002, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection. Next up is the woman who was deemed too dangerous to be released. Catherine Knight. In the small town of Tenterfield, New South Wales, Catherine Mary Knight was born on October 24, 1955. Her early life was steeped in chaos, setting the stage for a future that would shock the nation. Catherine's mother, Barbara Rucan, left her first husband to live with Ken Knight, a scandalous affair that forced them to move to Moree. Barbara's sons from her first marriage later joined them, adding to the troubling household. Ken Knight, Catherine's father, was an abusive man, known for his violent outbursts and sexual abuse of Barbara, which she recounted in explicit detail to her children. When the family returned to Aberdeen, Catherine's difficult upbringing continued. She claimed to have been sexually assaulted by family members until she was 11, allegations largely confirmed by family and accepted by psychiatrists. At Muswellbrook High School, Catherine was a bully and loner, known for violent outbursts. She once attacked a boy with a weapon and was injured by a teacher in self-defense. Despite this, she could be well-behaved and earned accolades. Catherine left school at 15, unable to read or write, and worked in a clothing factory. A year later, she found her dream job at a local abattoir, where she became a boner and kept her butcher knives hanging above her bed, a habit she maintained until her incarceration. Catherine's personal life was troubling, marked by violent relationships and struggles with mental health. Her marriage to David Kellett was marked by domestic violence, with Catherine attempting to strangle him on their wedding night and fracturing his skull with a frying pan while pregnant. She struggled with postnatal depression, leading to dangerous behavior and psychiatric hospitalizations. Her subsequent relationship with David Saunders was also violent, with Catherine attacking him and killing his dog in a fit of jealousy. The relationship ended with a restraining order against Saunders. Catherine's next relationship was with John Chillingworth, with whom she had a son. However, she left Chillingworth for John Price in 1995. Price was aware of her violent reputation, but their relationship initially seemed happy. This changed when Price refused to marry her. Catherine retaliated by filming stolen items symptoms from his workplace, leading to his dismissal. In February 2000, after Catherine assaulted him with a butcher's knife, Price took out a restraining order. Tragically, on February 29th, he told co-workers that if he didn't show up for work, it was because Catherine had killed him. That night, Catherine arrived at Price's house, and after a night together, she brutally murdered him, stabbing him at least 37 times. She then skinned him, hung his hide from a meat hook, decapitated him, and cooked parts of his body to serve to his children. Catherine was found in a drugged stupor and arrested. Her trial became one of the most harrowing in Australian history. She initially pled guilty to manslaughter, but the charge was upgraded to murder. On November 8th, Justice Barry O'Keefe sentenced her to life in prison without parole, marking her papers never to be released, making her the first woman in Australia to receive this sentence. The next story is about a woman whose crimes shocked the entire community of 25 Cromwell Street. Rosemary West. In the dim corners of HM Prison New Hall, a name strikes fear into the hearts of many. Rosemary Pauline Rose West. Her story starts in Northam, Devon, where she was born in November 1953. Rose's early life was troubling. Her mother struggled with mental health issues, undergoing electroconvulsive therapy, while her father was violent, leaving deep psychological scars on Rose. Growing up, Rose faced increasing dysfunction at home. Her father's abusive behavior blurred the lines of care and misconduct, shaping Rose's twisted understanding of love and relationships. By the time she was 15, she met Fred West, a man 12 years her senior, at a bus stop in Cheltenham. Despite initial reservations, Rose was drawn to Fred, who offered an escape from her troubled home. Fred, already a father, brought Rose into his life as a nanny to his children. Rose's parents, alarmed by this relationship, reported her to social services, alleging her involvement in prostitution. Despite their efforts, Rose remained with Fred. In 1972, Fred and Rose married in a secretive ceremony, marking the beginning of their notorious partnership. They settled at 25 Cromwell Street, a place that would become infamous. Rose juggled her role as wife and mother with her work as a prostitute, encouraged by Fred. He installed peepholes and a baby monitor to spy on her sessions with clients, using the money she earned to fund their wicked lifestyle. Their children suffered the most, especially Charmaine, Fred's daughter from a previous marriage. Rose killed Charmaine and lied about her whereabouts for years. The West's house of horrors extended beyond their family as they lured young women to their homes, where they faced unimaginable torture and death. The couple's crimes continued unchecked for years, with victims disappearing without a trace. Eventually, police discovered the remains of their victims buried in the garden and under the house. Personal belongings of these missing women were also found in their homes, linking Rose and Fred to the murders. In October 1995, Rose West went on trial, drawing global attention. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including testimonies from surviving victims and Fred's confessions before his prison suicide. They depicted Rose as an active participant in the murders, a claim supported by Fred's statements. Rose's defense was one of denial, portraying herself as another victim of Fred's violence. Her lawyers tried to shift all blame onto Fred, but the prosecution's case was strong. Found guilty on all counts, Rose West was sentenced to life imprisonment. Her legacy as one of Britain's most reviled criminals was sealed. Inside HM Prison New Hall, Rose's notorious reputation follows her. Inmates and guards alike treat her with a mix of fear and curiosity. Finally, the woman who brought terror to Veterans Affairs Medical Center. Kristen Gilbert. Within the walls of the Federal Medical Center, Carswell, in Fort Worth, Texas, resides a woman, Kristen Heather Gilbert. Born on a crisp autumn day in November 1967, Kristen Heather Strickland entered the world in Fall River, Massachusetts. She was the firstborn to Richard, an electronics executive, and Claudia, a homemaker and part-time teacher. Kristen's life seemed ordinary, but troubling patterns began to emerge. As a teenager, she became known for lying and manipulative behavior, including fake suicide attempts that hinted at darker tendencies. After graduating from Groton Dunstable Regional High School, Kristen pursued a nursing career at Bridgewater State College. A faked suicide attempt led to psychiatric treatment and a transfer to Mount Wachusett Community College, then Greenfield Community College, where she earned her nursing diploma in 1988. That same year, Kristen married Glenn Gilbert and started a new chapter. Kristen's professional journey began in 1989 at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Northampton. Initially, she seemed like a promising nurse, even appearing in the VA Practitioner magazine in April 1990. But soon, colleagues noticed an unusually high number of deaths during her shifts. In 1996, the Veterans Affairs Medical Center saw a disturbing rise in patient deaths, particularly during cardiac arrests. Epinephrine, a life-saving drug, was disappearing at an alarming rate. Suspicion fell on Kristen Gilbert, whose presence during these emergencies was too consistent to ignore. An investigation was launched. As the hospital investigated, Gilbert tried to disrupt the inquiry by calling in a bomb threat. However, this reckless act only drew more attention to her. Authorities traced the call call back to her, and the investigation intensified. Evidence mounted. Colleagues testified about Gilbert's behavior, and records showed a clear link between her shifts and the mortality rate. The misuse of epinephrine became undeniable. Kristen Gilbert's trial drew intense public interest. Assistant U.S. Attorney William M. Welch, too, led the prosecution, presenting a careful case. They showed a timeline of deaths at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center that matched Gilbert's shifts. Witnesses described how she thrived in the chaos of resuscitation attempts. Statistical analysis suggested that the likelihood of her innocence was 1 in 100 million. The prosecution portrayed her as someone who craved attention and control. Using her medical knowledge to create life-threatening situations she could then heroically resolve. Defense attorney David P. Hoose argued there was no direct evidence linking Gilbert to the injections and suggested the deaths could be due to patients' pre-existing conditions. However, the jury was not convinced. Gilbert was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole plus 20 years. For more thrilling content, click on the boxes playing on your screen to watch similar content.
January 5th, 2023, several officers, EMS, and fire department personnel rushed into a residence in Tulsa, Oklahoma, after a 12-year-old girl stabbed her little brother 3 times in the chest. The boy's screams from his room downstairs prompted their mother to rush to the scene, where she found him in a pool of blood.
Even the worst of us can make progress. Even the ones who've been through hell and back can still make it.
There is no age limit on pure evil. From a tender age, certain children have already developed an appetite for destruction. After committing several heinous crimes, their malevolent aura follows them behind bars and becomes a source of fear for the other inmates. These are some of the most feared children in prison. Alex and Derek King. In a shocking and tragic case that rocked the small town of Cantonment, Florida, 2 children committed an unthinkable act of violence, murdering their own father. Terry Lee King, a resident of Cantonment, met a gruesome fate at the hands of his own sons, 13-year-old Derek and 12-year-old Alex King. On that fateful day, November 26, 2001, the brothers bludgeoned their father to death with an aluminum baseball bat before setting fire to their family home in a desperate attempt to conceal their heinous crime. This horrifying incident would unravel a web of secrets, manipulation, and controversy as the boys' motives in the involvement of a family friend, Ricky Chavis, came to light. As the investigation into the murder of Terry Lee King unfolded, the shocking details of the crime began to emerge, shedding light on the disturbing dynamics within the King family. The 2 young boys, Derek and Alex King, had committed an act that defied comprehension, the murder of their own father. On that fateful day, November 26, 2001, the lives of the King family were forever changed. finished, Terry King, a 40-year-old resident of Cantonment, Florida, met a brutal end at the hands of his own children. Derek, aged 13, and Alex, aged 12, carried out a horrifying act of violence that would send shockwaves through the community. The murder weapon, an aluminum baseball bat, became the instrument of their father's demise. With calculated brutality, the brothers bludgeoned Terry King to death, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable horror. But their actions did not stop there. In a desperate attempt to conceal their crime, they set fire to their family home, hoping to erase any evidence of their heinous act. The motive behind such a heinous crime seemed unfathomable. The boys claimed that they were driven to commit this act due to the mental abuse they endured, including being stared down and subjected to physical punishment. But as the investigation deepened, their testimonies would change, casting doubt on their initial claims. The involvement of Ricky Chavez, a family friend, added another layer of complexity to the case. Chavez was convicted of being an accessory to the murder after he hid the boys in his trailer home and washed the blood from their clothes. The extent of Chavez's influence on the young boys and the nature of their relationship would become subjects of intense scrutiny. In an unconventional move, the prosecution decided to try both Chavez and the King brothers for the same crime. The trial would become a media spectacle, capturing the attention of the nation and inspiring heated debates. The prosecution sought justice for the slain father, while the defense fought to uncover the truth behind the boys' actions. Despite the efforts of the prosecution, Chavez was ultimately acquitted. However, the King brothers faced a different fate. On September 6, 2002, a second-degree murder conviction was obtained for the brothers, yet their legal battle was far from over. The judge presiding over the case made a controversial decision, throwing out the conviction due to concerns over the boys' right to due process. This unexpected turn of events left the case in limbo, with the prosecution and defense seeking a resolution through mediation to avoid a new trial. Ultimately, both Derek and Alex King pleaded guilty to third-degree murder in November 2002. The resolution of the case left many questions unanswered and sparked intense controversy. A book titled A Perversion of Justice, A Southern Tragedy of Murder, Lies, and Innocence Betrayed was published, arguing that the boys were innocent. The book's authors, Catherine Medico and Molly Barrows, faced criticism from the prosecution, who dismissed their claims as naive and asserted that they may never understand the truth. The punishment handed down to the King brothers was a subject of debate. Derek King, at the age of 13, was sentenced to 8 years in prison, while Alex King, at the age of 12, received a 7-year sentence. The young boys would spend their formative years behind bars, grappling with the consequences of their actions. Their time in prison was not without its challenges. The reputation of the King brothers preceded them, and they were feared by both inmates and prison staff. The brutal nature of their crime and the media attention it garnered made them targets within the prison walls. Their struggle for survival and redemption would become a central theme in their journey towards rehabilitation. The murder of Terry Lee King by his own children remains a haunting and tragic chapter in the annals of criminal history. It serves as a stark reminder of the depths of human darkness and the complexities of the human psyche. As the case of the King brothers unfolded, it became clear that the murder of their father was not a simple act of violence, but a complex web of manipulation, shifting testimonies, and controversial relationships. One of the key figures in this intricate puzzle was Ricky Chavez, a family friend who played a significant role in the events leading up to and following the murder. Ricky Chavez, a trusted acquaintance of the King family, became entangled in the web of deceit and violence that surrounded the case. His involvement would raise questions about his influence over the young boys and the extent of his culpability in the murder of Terry Lee King. Chavez was convicted of being an accessory to the murder. His actions immediately after the crime raised suspicions and cast a shadow of doubt over his intentions. The nature of Chavez's relationship with the King brothers became a subject of intense scrutiny during the trial. Alex King, in his testimony, claimed that he had been engaged in a sexual relationship with Chavez. This revelation shocked the courtroom and added another layer of complexity to an already convoluted case. The prosecution argued that Chavez had manipulated the young boys, convincing them to commit the murder and then aiding them in covering up the crime. However, Chavez maintained his innocence, claiming that he had no involvement in the murder and that the boys had acted on their own accord. The trial of Chavez, alongside the King brothers, captivated the nation. The prosecution sought to hold him accountable for his alleged role in the murder, while the defense painted a picture of a man wrongly accused, caught in the crossfire of a tragic family drama. In a surprising turn of events, Chavez was acquitted of all charges. The jury's decision left many perplexed and added fuel to the already heated controversy surrounding the case. case. Some believed that justice had been served, while others questioned whether the true culprits had been held accountable. The acquittal of Chavez further complicated the legal proceedings against the King brothers. The judge presiding over the case decided to throw out their second-degree murder conviction, citing concerns over the violation of their right to due process. This decision left the case in a state of uncertainty, with both the prosecution and defense seeking a resolution through mediation. Ultimately, Derek and Alex King pleaded guilty to third-degree murder in November 2002. The resolution of the case brought a sense of closure, but it also left lingering questions about the true nature of their involvement and the extent of Chavez's influence. The case of the King brothers and Ricky Chavez sparked intense controversy and inspired a range of opinions. A book titled A Perversion of Justice, A Southern Tragedy of Murder, Lies, and Innocence Betrayed was published, arguing that the boys were innocent and had been manipulated by Chavez. The authors, Catherine Medico and Molly Barrows, faced criticism from the prosecution, who dismissed their claims as unfounded. The punishment handed down to the King brothers was met with mixed reactions. Derek, at the age of 13, was sentenced to 8 years in prison, while Alex, at the age of 12, received a 7-year sentence. The young boys would spend their formative years behind bars, grappling with the consequences of their actions and the weight of their guilt. Life in prison was not easy for the King brothers. Their reputation as murderers preceded them, and they were feared by both inmates and prison staff. The brutal nature of their crime and the media attention it garnered made them targets within the prison walls. Their struggle for survival and redemption would become a central theme in their journey towards rehabilitation. The case of the King brothers and Ricky Chavez remains a haunting and controversial chapter in criminal history. It serves as a stark reminder of the complexities of human behavior and the devastating consequences that can arise from a toxic mix of manipulation, abuse, and violence. Nehemiah Griego. Today, we bring you a chilling tale that shook the quiet community of South Valley, New Mexico. It's a story of unspeakable tragedy, a family torn apart by a horrifying act of violence. Join us as we uncover the dark and twisted events surrounding the South Valley homicides, committed by none other than Nehemiah Griego. It was a seemingly ordinary day in the peaceful neighborhood of South Valley, New Mexico. The Griego family, consisting of Greg Griego, a former pastor, his wife Sarah, and their 3 younger children, went about their daily routines, unaware of the horror that awaited them. Little did they know that their lives were about to be shattered in the most unimaginable way. January 19th, 2013, started like any other day for the Griego family. The sun rose over the picturesque South Valley, casting a warm glow on the quiet streets lined with neatly manicured lawns. Neighbors exchanged friendly greetings as they went about their morning rituals, completely unaware of the darkness that lurked behind closed doors. Inside the Griego family home, the atmosphere seemed calm and ordinary. Nehemiah Griego, the eldest son at the age of 15, appeared to be an average teenager, but beneath his seemingly normal facade, a storm was brewing within him, a storm that would soon unleash unspeakable violence. Nehemiah Griego, a troubled young man, harbored deep-seated anger and resentment. His troubled mind was a breeding ground for sinister thoughts that would soon manifest into a horrifying reality. Griego meticulously planned a heinous act that would forever scar the South Valley community. As the day progressed, the Griego family went about their usual routines. The parents, Greg and Sarah, lovingly attended to their children, blissfully unaware of the darkness that loomed over their home. In the late afternoon, Nehemiah Griego's plan was set into motion. With a chilling calmness, he retrieved a firearm from the family's home, a weapon that would become the instrument of destruction. One by one, Griego methodically carried out his sinister plan, ending the lives of his parents and 3 younger siblings. The Griego family home, once filled with love and laughter, now stood as a haunting crime scene. The tranquility of South Valley was shattered, replaced by an overwhelming sense of shock and disbelief. The community was left grappling with the unimaginable loss of 5 innocent lives. The South Valley community was left reeling in the wake of the devastating Griego family tragedy. As the shockwaves reverberated through the neighborhood, law enforcement swiftly moved to uncover the truth behind the heinous act. The focus of their investigation quickly turned to the eldest son, Nehemiah Griego. Detectives meticulously pieced together the evidence, building a case against Nehemiah Griego. The chilling details that emerged painted a disturbing picture of a troubled young man driven to commit an unthinkable crime. On that fateful day, as the Griego family's home became a scene of unspeakable horror, Nehemiah Griego's plan took an unexpected turn. Instead of carrying out further acts of violence, he made a decision that would ultimately lead to his capture. Griego called a trusted friend, confessing confessing to the unimaginable crimes he had committed. Law enforcement swiftly responded to the call, apprehending Nehemiah Griego without incident. The once seemingly ordinary teenager was now a cold-blooded killer, his actions sending shockwaves through the tight-knit South Valley community. Nehemiah Griego's arrest marked the beginning of a legal battle that would captivate the nation. Charged with the murders of his parents and 3 younger siblings, Griego initially pleaded not guilty due to insanity. The courtroom became a stage for the unfolding drama as the prosecution and defense presented their cases. The prosecution painted a chilling portrait of a calculating killer, arguing that Griego's actions were premeditated and devoid of any signs of insanity. The defense, on the other hand, sought to shed light on Griego's troubled mental state, presenting a case for diminished capacity. After careful deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict. Nehemiah Griego was found guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder and 3 counts of child abuse, resulting in death. However, due to his status as a minor at the time of the crimes, Griego was initially sentenced as a juvenile. The sentencing sparked outrage and controversy as many questioned whether justice had truly been served. But in a surprising turn of events, a judge later reversed the ruling, sentencing Nehemiah Griego as an adult. Griego received 3 concurrent life sentences plus 7 years, with a requirement to serve 30 years before being eligible for parole. Today, Nehemiah Griego resides in the confines of the Lea County Correctional Center, serving his sentence for the South Valley homicides. Behind bars, he has built quite a reputation for himself. Griego's name carries weight within the prison walls, his actions forever etched in the annals of criminal history. His story serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can reside within even the most unsuspecting individuals. South Valley Homicides by Nehemiah Griego will forever be etched in the pages of true crime history. The once peaceful community of South Valley, New Mexico, was shattered by the unimaginable acts of violence that unfolded within the Griego family home. The shockwaves of this heinous crime reverberated through the tight-knit community, leaving a lasting impact on the lives of those who knew the Griego family. The loss of Greg and Sarah Griego, along with their 3 innocent children, left a void that could never be filled. The legal proceedings that followed Nehemiah Griego's arrest were marked by intense scrutiny and controversy. From his initial plea of not guilty due to insanity to the subsequent reversal of his sentencing as a juvenile, the case sparked debates about justice and the complexities of the human mind. The Griego family's loved ones continue to grapple with the immense loss and pain caused by this tragedy. Their lives are forever altered, and they strive to find solace and healing in the face of unimaginable grief. Jamarian Lawhorn. In 2014, the peaceful town of Kentwood, Michigan was forever changed by a brutal crime that thrust Jamarian Lawhorn into the spotlight. At the age of 12, Lawhorn committed a shocking act of violence on a local playground, resulting in the tragic death of 9-year-old Connor Verkerke. This horrific incident earned Lawhorn the infamous title of Kent County's youngest killer. Now, nearly 8 years later, Lawhorn is determined to share his side of the story and shed light on the events that led to that fateful day. Brace yourself for a captivating and thought-provoking story that will leave you questioning the complexities of youth, trauma, and the pursuit of redemption. In the quiet town of Kentwood, Michigan, the summer of 2014 was filled with the laughter of children playing on the local playgrounds. But amidst the innocence and joy, a storm was brewing in the life of 12-year-old Jamarian Lawhorn. Behind his youthful facade, Lawhorn carried a heavy burden of pain and despair, a burden that would ultimately lead to a devastating act of violence. Lawhorn's journey towards that fateful day began long before the sun-drenched summer months. Growing up in a home plagued by abuse and neglect, he was no stranger to the darkness that can lurk within the walls of a seemingly ordinary house. The scars of his troubled upbringing ran deep, leaving him emotionally scarred and desperate for an escape from the torment that consumed his young life. As the months passed,